CyberHub Engage podcast is sponsored by CyberHub Summit, hosting its second annual Cybersecurity Summit in Atlanta, Georgia on October 10th, 2018, featuring a live tabletop exercise with audience participation, global speakers, engaging topics. Experience cyber different at www.cyberhubsummit.com. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I am in beautiful downtown Atlanta today. It is a beautiful morning with some great views because I'm at the Metro Atlanta Chamber offices, and I always love a field trip to do a podcast, and today was one of those. And I'm joined by Jorge Fernandez. Jorge, how's it going?
Pretty good. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, man. So we're actually enjoying this because people are walking by and we're in a fishbowl. And so we're probably going to get distracted quite often because they're going to see two dudes, one of handsome, that'll be you, and talking to microphones. But I'm glad we got to do this. How you doing today?
Doing great.
So you were a Delta pilot for a while, right?
No, I was not a Delta pilot. I was a U.S. Air Force pilot, but I did work at Delta, but on the business side.
So U.S. Air Force pilot, did you fly anything cool?
I did.
That you can talk about?
Yeah, of course. First of all, one of the things that are really cool is teaching young guys how to fly. So I was a flight instructor at the beautiful Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and taking these young kids into the air and getting their life in your hands and making a decision for them whether they can fly or not. It was very challenging, but at the same time very rewarding.
How long did you do that for?
With that, I did it for about 5 years, but I spent 20 years in the Air Force. I flew other aircrafts. I flew KC-135s, which is air refuelers, so deployed all over the world, ferrying aircraft all over the world.
Well, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
And you did do some business for Delta. For some reason, I thought you were a Delta pilot.
No. I intended to be a pilot at Delta. In fact, I applied at Delta as a pilot. And while I was going through that process, an opportunity came about when Delta was launching the Latin American service, and they were creating a business unit, and they were looking for somebody to lead that unit. And so I ended up at Delta, and that's what brought me in to Atlanta.
So instead of having an office at 35,000 feet, you ended up having an office on the ground level like everyone else.
But it was a great opportunity for me in terms of launching a new service into a new region.
Metro Atlanta Chamber, you guys have, first of all, beautiful offices. I will be taking pictures and posting those, so if you're listening and you want to see how awesome these offices are, we'll have
Well,
some
speaking
pictures.
of pictures, and one of the coolest things of this new location, we've been here for about almost 2 years, because we used to be a Centennial Park. But the coolest thing about what I like about this building is that when we bring in prospects looking at Atlanta for investment, we could give them what I call the static helicopter tour. Because from each direction of the building, we can point out assets of the region, which is important to businesses.
Right, because you guys have the whole floor here.
We got the whole floor.
And it's all glass. I mean, you can see every single part of the city of Atlanta, the suburbs of Atlanta, the state of Georgia. I mean, on a clear day here, I'm sure the view is amazing.
Absolutely.
What role does the Metro Atlanta Chamber really play in the developing the business ecosystem of the state of Georgia, let's say regionally?
Right. Let me go back a little bit in time because I think that's extremely important. We were created in 1859. So we've been around for a long time. Sometimes it feels like I was here when it was created. Then there was a 4-year hiatus for obvious reasons. And then the chamber played a critical role in developing the region post-Civil War. We have always been a private business organization. We do not accept funds from public sources. So we are 100%, and we've always been 100% privately and non-profit business organizations. We played a critical role during Reconstruction, and post-reconstruction. And in 1926, a group of companies came together and created a fund basically called Forward Atlanta that constitute our current capital fund every 5 years.
Right.
That allows us to do what we do. This happened in, like I said, in 1926, and if you compare what Atlanta was in 1926 to some of the surrounding major cities in the South, like Birmingham, Montgomery, and some of the other cities, you could see the effect of that. If you fast forward right now, we're in Atlanta today, if you take the GDP of the region, it's the 33rd economy in the world.
Wow. This little region.
This little region.
We call it little by all means.
Well, it's not little. It's not.
It's very
Actually,
robust.
the metro area constitutes, most people think of when we say Metro Atlanta, we're talking about the downtown area, but we're not. We really cover the whole statistical metropolitan area of Atlanta, which are 29 counties. It's 6 million people and an economy of $350 billion.
What's the number one, I guess, industry in the Metro Atlanta area?
It has changed, but I would say the legacy and what created Atlanta and in a way set us apart was and it is still the logistics and the supply chain, which is very much connected to advanced manufacturing today, because manufacturers want those logistics. In fact, if you look at some of the assets that we have in the city or outside the city, even as far as Savannah, with the Port of Savannah, if you put the Port of Savannah assets, if you put the rail components that we have here in the city plus the airport, makes us among the top 3 distribution centers in the United States.
Atlanta has the most traveled airport in the world.
That's correct.
122 million passengers
a year. That is correct. Or around 2,500 flights a day.
How does that contribute to the business environment in Atlanta? I mean, what's the good part of it, and what's the negative part of it?
It actually is probably one of the top 3 assets that we got in the region, and I mean that is not only because of the number of passengers that come through and get to know Atlanta, but also the access that we have. We're one of the most connected airports. So a lot of companies select Atlanta because of the airport, given that from the airport you can reach over 80% of the U.S. market, 80% of U.S. GDP, 80% of the U.S. population in less than 2 hours nonstop. There are very few cities that can say that. So what we always say to companies is, don't choose Atlanta just because Atlanta is your market. It's the 80% of the U.S. market. There's no other city that can give you that for that accessibility. So the airports provide access that is unparalleled.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of the airport is that the really weight of the airport is not just the runways, but it is what it means beyond the confines of the runway, because it gives you access not only to markets, but it gives you access to corporations, it gives you access to ecosystems, it gives you access to the great educational organizations that we have.
Right, I mean, Georgia boasts Georgia Tech, UGA, Georgia State, I mean, all within...
Absolutely.
The education ecosystem here is, the talent here
it's another of our big assets in the region.
You were just in China trying to promote trade relations. Obviously, Delta has a new line between Shanghai and Atlanta. That's a new direct flight that's launching next year.
No, it already did.
It already did.
Right.
Okay, so it's great. Because from here you can fly to direct to Asia. It's Shanghai, Tokyo, and Seoul.
Seoul, correct.
Right.
And the importance of that flight, it's not just the fact that it's yet one more flight, but it's part of an integrated strategy that we are really, as the chamber, in partnership with the business community, really need to grow the number of non-stops out of Atlanta. Because when you have a non-stop flight, that's facilitate the accessibility to the market. So adding and continuing to have additional non-stops out of Atlanta, it's very important. So yes, China is a great market. China is the second largest economy, which it provides a lot of accessibility to companies to grow. But in addition to that, it's an integrated part of our strategy of growing an international global footprint in Atlanta.
You and I have taken part in a few events where we went promoting Atlanta and so forth in different areas. What's the surprise when you talk about Atlanta? What's the surprising? What are people surprised of when you talk about Atlanta? You know, when we were at RSA, for example, and we were talking to, companies there, and we were boasting Atlanta as an ecosystem. What facts surprised the other people that are like, known facts if you're from Atlanta, but people don't really see it outside of Atlanta?
Correct. One of our biggest, you asked earlier, what are some of the downsides? One of the biggest challenges that we face is the lack of identity of the region globally. People actually, they might know the airport because they're going to go through the airport one way or the other, but very few people know who we are as a place for doing business. So our biggest challenge is to get to people to get to know Atlanta, to bring them here. Once they come here, they like what they see. But we don't have a global identity. And that's because of historical reasons. If you take the global markets, they tend to gravitate either with their ethnic similarities, if you will. So if you're talking Europeans, they know Europe. They know New York. You talk Latin America, they know Miami. Asians know California, right? Los Angeles, San Francisco. So they tend to gravitate to that. So how do we get them to convince that they have to go beyond that? And then the other component of that has to do with now in the new economy, we also have the gravitation to where ecosystems are strong. So we are competing with some of the ecosystems that are known for a particular industry. So telling that story is an integral part of that.
I think there's again, we're in a fishbowl here, so it can get a bit distracting, and someone just passed by. And
Yeah.
We'll throw Grant under the bus. So when you see Grant from the Metro Chamber, you can tell him he distracted.
He's always clowning around.
He is, man.
Yeah.
He's funny though. We boast, and I say we because I represent Atlanta. I live here. I have my place of business here.
Right. And we're proud of that.
And we are, because we are a company that started really in Israel and chose Atlanta when everyone else goes to, New York, Boston, San Francisco. We came to Atlanta, and I wanted to tell you this because you missed this. There was an event at NCR. We did the Israeli Roadshow with Connex. And they brought a speaker who I will not identify. Their keynote speaker, I'll share that with you off the record, but for the sake of the public, I won't say who that is on air. And he was asked a question on a panel that we were on. Why Atlanta? He goes, what can Atlanta do to bring Israeli cybersecurity startups and whatnot to Atlanta? And he went on and he goes, most Israelis don't know where Atlanta is. Atlanta doesn't have the glamour of New York or San Francisco and Boston and other areas, and went on with a few other really, really bad reasons. And just when he was about to kind of switch topics, I had to kind of jump in there because I had to kind of play a little bit of defense. I felt like someone was just
punching you.
Yeah, I felt like I was being punched in the stomach. I mean, if you were there, you would have been really proud of me. I know that Patrick. Patrick had to hold my hand at one point because he's
calm you down.
He's like, you've got your point across. I was like, first of all, Israelis know where Atlanta is because for years Delta had a direct flight from Tel Aviv to Atlanta.
Correct.
It was a full flight every time. The JFK flights were half empty because you couldn't connect to nearly as many places through JFK like you could Atlanta. That's number one. And then the second piece of it was the ecosystem here. Well, we boast Delta, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, NCR, First Data. And that list keeps growing and growing.
In fact, we are the third largest concentration of Fortune 500 in the United States. Most people don't know that.
It's absolutely amazing. What attracts companies to Atlanta?
There are 5 points or 5 issues or category that really attracts company here. Some of these we already talked about. But one is the economic engine that we are. We're just talking about the GDP. We're the 33rd economy in the world. We are the economic capital of the Southeast. We are the third largest concentration of Fortune 500. And on top of that, you have the Fortune 1000. You can add more to the numbers on that, and including the Inc. 5000, we're the fourth largest in Inc. 5000, which is the privately owned companies. So there is a concentration of companies here and a concentration of economic power on that aspect. The second thing is the accessibility. We talked about the airport. We talked about the fact of the connectivity with rail, the connectivity with the Port of Savannah, and makes us the top 3 distribution centers in the United States. So you got ground transportation, you got air transportation, but it's also it's what I made reference before, that the confines with the accessibility of the airport. It's not just the confines of the runway, but it's access to those Fortune 500, Fortune 1000. Inc. 5000, and it's a great place to scale your business, which not many other cities have that. That's number 2. Number 3, we mentioned in passing too, it's talent. The great universities that we get here is second to none. Most people don't know the Georgia Tech's positioning in terms of number of engineers that it produces, being number 1. In the United States. It produces more than Stanford.
Top 25 globally.
Top 25 global. So there are more than 70 universities in the metro area, plus the technical college. So access to talent, which is probably the number 1 concerns of CEO, it's another reason. And then last but not least is quality of place. It's the weather. It's the cost of doing, the low cost of doing business, is the great opportunities that are available for residential, the expanse of the area, the access to food. If you're a foodie, this is a great place. Lakes and so forth and so on, so that are related to quality of life, which is important. Museums and activity and sports. It's an integral part of that. The story of the Atlanta United it's unbelievable.
Number 1 soccer team with the highest attendance record in history.
You got it. And if you look at the in fact, I was watching the other day because of when the MLS All-Star was playing here.
They played Juventus.
Exactly. I decided not to watch it on ESPN, but I watched it on Telemundo.
Me too.
And it's because of it's the atmosphere, it's the passion, and it's the goal, and the reporter was commenting over and over and over what they were. It's that passion of the audience and the diversity of the.
You hear it. So
hear
ESPN kind of really takes out crowd noise.
Out.
You see that in football games too, right? If it's an ESPN broadcast game, I think Fox really lets in some crowd noise, so it overtakes the announcers. CBS does too, but
Telemundo is great for that.
I watched the entire World Cup on Telemundo.
Yeah, me too.
Because I couldn't watch it with some of the English-speaking announcers. I'm like, guys, this isn't golf.
Exactly. And even if you don't speak Spanish, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Passion. It's a global language.
Well, this isn't. It's soccer is an American football, right? You don't have a play that needs to be analyzed. You're not waiting for an analysis.
Exactly. It's rolling.
It's gonna go like Perez to Escobar, Escobar to Montaña, Montaña goal.
You got it.
I mean, that's what it is, and so you enjoy that passion, but they don't filter out the crowd noise. So sometimes you barely hear the announcer over the crowd clapping and screaming, and it's just.
Well, interesting. Another news media was asking the other day, Hala, our president, what role has Atlanta United play in sort of economic development, and that it's that diversity and that global positioning that we're trying to get. It's really resonating. So that's another great asset that we'll talk about.
You know, I love that. I love just this whole region, and there's just so much to it. And we'll get to kind of, we are a cybersecurity podcast, and
Right.
we've spoken enough about Atlanta. Let's transition a bit to cybersecurity. And what I want to say is Atlanta's had a fair share of cybersecurity companies that started based here that are, leading a market. We're very underrated in terms of our cybersecurity ecosystem, I think. People don't realize all the companies that started here are based out of here, but tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. The whole area, and I would say, you asked me before what's one of the strongest industries here, and I mentioned was supply chain. But even that legacy industry is transforming. In the digital world, in the digital economy,
Right.
technology plays a big role. And I would say if you take all the technology associated companies, not only the companies that produce the technology, but the application of the technology that goes across every single industry. Take fintech, for example. We are 70% of the credit card swipes on payments are processing in Atlanta. Cybersecurity is an integral part of that. Supply chain now is transitioning. Their strategy is into the digital supply chain, and cybersecurity is an integral part of that. We are also a global hub for health. And if you talk about medical devices, you take electronic medical records, cybersecurity plays a role into that. The hospitals are very concerned. So what I find in this region, it's not just the companies that you're alluding to, but it is opening up the mind of the companies, of the hospital systems, of the companies that you normally don't consider themselves as cybersecurity companies, and how they are integrating into this ecosystem that is so important here.
Regionally, Governor Deal, who's the current governor of the state of Georgia, invested around, I think, $150 million
Right.
in building the Cyber Center in Augusta.
In Augusta, right? They just inaugurated it 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were there present.
And that has to have an impact across all of Georgia, but especially Metro Atlanta. I mean, Augusta's you can throw a rock and get there right now.
Yeah, but the impact of that, it goes way beyond Georgia. Because what it is it's a training center. It goes back to what I was telling you. What the CEO wants. You got your own business. What is your number one concern other than it's getting the people, it's the talent, right?
Right.
So the first level of that center is to train a workforce in cybersecurity. So the implications of that goes beyond the confines of the border of the state, which then adds another asset that we got into the region, to our cybersecurity ecosystem.
Very successful companies are based here. Like you said, we're the hub. Atlanta's the hub for a lot of supply chain, healthcare, so forth. And then you guys came along and you said, let's do a Cyber Week.
Correct.
Tell me about Atlanta Cyber Week.
Cyber Week is part of our integrated strategy of positioning Atlanta. It goes back to who are we? What's our global identity? And in cybersecurity, it's one of those. And it's something that I also have a passion on because I was in the military. And even though I was a pilot, the last part of my career was on cyber-related issues. So that was when you're in the infancy.
Right.
So how do we then start putting our arms around who's who in the region? How do we start promoting who's who in the region? And then we take that up into that forms an ecosystem, and how do we promote that ecosystem? So the best way to do this is to have. We started with just a single event, right?
Right.
Which was called CyberCon, which is put together by our friend Justin Daniel from Baker Donaldson. That was a great success in having that dialogue. And then we started to think, how do we take this to the next level? And then we created as a group, as an ecosystem. Why don't we take this similar to what London has with London Tech Week, right?
Right.
And start creating other events where other companies and other organizations and other people that have an interest on cybersecurity can display, can have dialogue, can offer opportunities and channels for companies to engage in the cyber world. So then that That's where you came in this year with your summit, with the Cyber Summit. We then have other organizations. Last year we had J.P. Morgan talked about to be part of all this, different Georgia, the different academic institution having a dialogue around talent, also on cybersecurity. So it started slowly and it will continue. We have a vision to still grow it. And it's not, even though we call it Atlanta Cyber Week, it's really, we're on the road to it's not even Georgia Cyber Week.
It's the Southeast.
But it is the Southeast, yeah. Correct.
There is a very, last year CyberHub Summit was not part of Cyber Week.
Right.
We were still, I think, a little too new, and it was too early. But for those who are listening who maybe have been in the years past, what's different this year from all years before?
Yeah, we've learned. I mean, as a pilot, every time you land, we have what we call hot wash, right?
Right.
And you took off and you landed and you're alive, right? So that constitutes in itself a success, right? But you always want to learn and you want to take your skills to the next level. So the hot wash that we've had from CyberCon is how do we then add more to the pie? How do we make this ecosystem kind of play, and because then everybody will have an opportunity, right? And by everybody having an opportunity and growth opportunities and showcase and telling the Atlanta story, everybody wins. So the difference in the past was that we needed to diversify the audience and we needed to provide a space where CISOs can talk about what issues matters to them. And within that space, it is very important to have a conversation between CISOs and other CISOs from different organizations and not get bombarded by vendors alone, right? So we need to create that space to have that dialogue at the operational level, not necessarily at the policy level, because there are other organizations that also have the same conversation with CISOs, but at the policy level, this is more at the operational level. But we also needed to have a space where the vendors, where the startup community, which is integral to this ecosystem, have a place that they can pitch, right? And they can pitch their solution, they can pitch their opportunities that they can bring, and have that access to scaling that we were talking about, access to the Fortune 500 and so forth and so on. So provide a space for those startup community to do exactly that. So now we have that opportunity. In addition to that, we have to have a dialogue with the general community, which is what you are providing with your summit, that integrates components of all this, but it's broader than just CISOs. And then the other part that was important was we were focusing, and it was correctly so at the beginning, because you needed to integrate the ecosystem around the technology of cybersecurity. I think that the most poignant thing that we have opened this year, it's that cybersecurity, it's not about IT. Cybersecurity is not about the technology of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, it's about risk. It's about business risk. And it is as important as any other risk that a company faces, right? So, and insurance is not the answer. So having the C-suites of the company, and when I mean C-suite, I'm not inferring just the big corporation. I'm using that figuratively for the owners of business, to have a business discussion around cybersecurity and the importance of cybersecurity. How do you defend it? How do you control it? How do you react if you get a breach? And having that dialogue from the business perspective, it's really the difference of Cyber Week this year.
There is, I have a saying. If it's your first time listening to the podcast, when I listen to other episodes, you'll hear me talk about it. Cybersecurity is not a CISO's responsibility. It's
Correct.
An organizational responsibility.
Correct.
There's too much stuff focused on a CISO and not enough focused on how the rest of the C-suite also carries responsibility.
Correct.
this Cyber Week, I think, is different from a lot of different aspects, but there are, a few main events this year. So, I mean, for most people, it's a Tuesday to Thursday kind of deal,
Right.
to attend. Excellent. And
When we talk about, I mean, you're hitting right the point, and it's not just the C-suite that we're talking about, right? But when we
Right,
talk
it's
business,
everyone's
it's
responsibility.
everybody's responsibility, including the board.
Right.
It's this conversations happening at the board level, and this year we're engaging the National Association of Corporate Boards to be part of Cyber Week, because we already had an event around board, in the importance of cybersecurity to the board, and we want to transmit that dialogue out at Cyber Week,
Well,
which is
you don't see a lot of people in. So a makeup of a board in most organization is, you've got your financial guy, your audit guy, your technology
Ethical,
person,
yeah.
your operation, your ethical. Financial services companies, banks have started incorporating a security person on
Right.
their board, but other organizations still haven't picked up to it. Supply chain, infrastructure, you name it, transportation. They haven't even started looking at the makeup of their board and how they incorporate cybersecurity, which I think it's a very important piece for any organization to have someone who can be the security advocate.
right, and that is what we're trying. That is the main message out of Cyber Week this year, which is different from the past. Taking cybersecurity out of the IT world or the technology world, and addressing it as a business concern, a business risk, a business responsibility and accountability.
I want to do kind of a shameless promotion.
Go for it.
I'm going after this to go meet with Justin, and I'm glad. If you're listening, we partnered with Atlanta Cyber Week, and we have obviously the event that is sponsoring this podcast on Wednesday, CyberCon's Tuesday, and then Thursday there's an event for startups at the Atlanta Tech Village, and there's more information on atlantacyberweek.com, correct?
ATLcyberweek.com.
Right,
ATLcyberweek.
So,
and that's growing. It's not static. So more activities
more
are
more stuff's coming. So if you're regional and you're looking to get here, I mean, Tuesday's a one-day event, Wednesday's a active event, so it's not one where you're sitting for 8 hours
right.
listening to speakers.
And we're spreading also the events, not just in one location.
Right.
Your event will take over at Ponce City Market. We got another one at Georgia Tech. We got another one in Alpharetta.
Right.
That we're partnering with Alpharetta Tech. We are also offering a tour of the center in Augusta.
Right.
So we're spreading the location to get a feel of what that ecosystem is all about.
And they can get all that information at atlcyberweek.com.
That's correct.
And you can kind of see the different events and so forth. And if you want to attend more than one event, you can ping me, ping Jorge. We'll share some of our details online.
Correct.
At the CyberHub Engage Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn page, so you can just tune in there, and we'll have some information for if you want to attend more than one event and you kind of want us to incorporate a discount. Just I guess reach out to us. We'll try to help you out. And if you're a CISO, you can reach out to either one of us, and we'll gladly facilitate an agenda that suits you as well. The Cyber Week's really interesting because it's not just regional folks that are here. We also have a good amount of international folks coming in for it. And people are starting to see, like I said, the advantage of Atlanta.
Right.
People are starting to see, everything that you've been working so long for. How long have you been trying to get Atlanta on the scene in the security industry?
In the security industry, I would say that this is now about our 5th year that we have been focusing on cybersecurity. Before that, it's not that we were not focusing on it, but it was part of the broader technology.
Right.
But we've separated cyber from the technology in terms of a specific activity. The same thing happened with IoT, which is again another area which is growing tremendously in Atlanta, which got a cybersecurity component by definition.
Huge. It's actually very. It's an integral piece of it. If you're a CISO in anywhere around the country, why would you look at Atlanta for not only talent but for innovation?
Innovation, and this is an important thing in the new digital world. Innovation could happen anywhere around the world, right? So the important thing is, how do you integrate that? And a great example of that is Cox Communications or Turner, that are traditionally not what you consider supply chain, for example, that has elements of cybersecurity, and that innovation happens everywhere. So integrating that innovation is key, and this is a great place because of some of the assets that we mentioned before, the accessibility to not only physical assets but also people assets and scaling, etc., makes that happen. But beyond that, the startup I mean, if you look at the vibe, if you will, of what is happening in Atlanta in terms of the numbers of co-working spaces, of accelerators, we can't keep track of them. We have a slide that keep listening, we keep changing. And then the startup community around, we have an entrepreneurship and an innovation department that we created to back these companies. In fact, we got a program called Back by ATL, which is sort of mentors companies that are in the startup communities that are innovators. We just finished a deep dive with the Brookings Institution with the help of JP Morgan to look at our clusters to see, are we really are who we say we are, and demonstrate it. But the number two is this an innovative cluster? Because if it is not innovative, then why should you focus on that?
Right.
And third, if there's a global demand to that, right? And definitely that innovation, that vibe around the startup community, the vibe around innovation is ever present in Atlanta. In fact, there was a report that came out. I can't remember right at the moment who came out in terms about the innovation in Atlanta. It's one of the top cities, and
yeah, it was top 3. It was on Business Insider.
on Business Insider.
Yeah,
No, there was one that just came out this week or last week that and positions Atlanta one of the top markets for innovation and the startup vibe.
I will say this. When we did the Israeli Startup Roadshow at NCR, it was hosted by Bob at NCR. And,
right.
There were about 12 to 15 Israeli startups there. And we told them, out of NCR's new building in Midtown, we said, hey, look around here. Let me tell you, within a 5-minute walk here, you have 6 or 7 different co-working and accelerators that you can go into and start working on your business that can give you access to the markets you're trying to reach.
Correct.
Domestically, we're not talking just Atlanta.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of different cyber funds available here, and there's more coming. I can attest to that. We've conducted our own little kind of. We've been speaking to a lot of different venture capital that is starting to set up rep offices in Atlanta to start looking at some of the innovation that's going on here for investment and management controls.
That's another area, Venture Atlanta, where it started and where we are right now.
Venture Atlanta is in October as well, right?
Correct. It is in October.
When is it? Do you know?
It is the same week.
Same week?
I think. Yeah, absolutely. I'll check on that. Let's go back to maybe.
Yeah. Hang on. I got to check that real fast while we're doing that. But yeah, I mean.
And the other story on that, while you look for that, the other story, I mean, you were talking about innovation. Look at the highly successful innovative center that Coca-Cola opened at Tel Aviv, the bridge. That was so successful in producing innovation for Coca-Cola, not only technology, but also business processes, marketing, innovation, etc. Because innovations across, we tend to think of innovation in technologies, but it's not. Now, it was so successful that they opened, because of what Atlanta offers, a bridge here in Atlanta, and which is a cohort of different companies to provide innovation, and that they don't have to go around looking for all over the United States, but it's right here.
So Venture Atlanta, by the way, is October 16th and 17th.
Oh, there you go. It's
the week after. It's right across the street from you. It's literally, you can walk out this building and walk over. I mean, that's awesome. It's at 200 Peachtree.
Excellent.
And the website is ventureatlanta.org. And so I know we have venture capital listeners on the show. So as you're listening, and if you're looking to hear more about the venture part of Atlanta, Venture Atlanta is a great thing. Last year they had Mark Cuban keynote. which was great.
Fantastic.
It was fantastic, and it was at the College Football Hall of Fame, which is in Atlanta.
In Atlanta.
And that was very cool. And we've spoken a lot about, and this episode's a little different for our listeners because it's not just cyber. We're not talking about operationalizing cyber. We're talking about an ecosystem. And if you're a CISO, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this was not only to kind of bring awareness to Atlanta Cyber Week, but also help people realize the value that the Metro Chamber plays in developing this entire ecosystem here. And you guys have entire people working all around us here that their entire job is to just help companies get into Atlanta or help them find the right people in Atlanta to grow their business no matter where their business is.
Absolutely. And by the way, let me put a pitch because we talk about innovations and the startup community and small businesses and mid-sized business, not only the big corporation we're talking about. We are about to launch a grant program that is not limited to cyber, but it's a program designed for a company that stands out with innovation that will increase their international sales, and which is called the export pitch component of that.
Right.
And important thing, when I say exports, people think of manufacturing good. It's way beyond that.
But it's services.
It's services, correct. So if you're a company that are looking at expand your international footprint, your international sales, which is exports, we have a program in which we match up to $5,000 for up to 30 companies, and then you have the opportunity to come back at a pitch, Shark Tank style, to be able to receive an additional 20,000, 10,000, an additional 5. So you could walk out with $5,000 or up to $25,000 to increase your international footprint, and that could be either by this is a great. You talk about the different ecosystem to go and attend shows that will bring sales for you, international sales, or you could use it to increase your export capacity by translating websites. So it's a great opportunity. The deadline for submission is August 31st.
And what's the website?
And you could get information on the website, which is AtlantaExportPortal.com.
Perfect. Jorge, I want to say thank you for hosting us. Well, hosting me at your beautiful offices.
It's a pleasure. And by the way, we're just not been speaking, but I'm doing my work in terms of, because I've a VP for global commerce. My job is to tell the Atlanta story, which we have done, is to recruit foreign companies to come here, but also to help companies here grow international. And you're part of that ecosystem for the global. You're an Israeli company that's selected Atlanta. So our job is to help you grow and to help those companies that are here to grow through either exports or grow their footprint in the United States. So you're doing my strategy. You're helping me do my strategy, deliver on my strategy.
Awesome. This is the CyberHub Engage podcast. I want to thank Jorge Fernandez, VP of Commerce at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, for being with us today. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We're going to be right back after this little break, so stay tuned. The CyberHub Engage podcast is sponsored by CyberHub Summit, hosting its second annual Cybersecurity Summit in Atlanta, Georgia on October 10th, 2018, featuring a live tabletop exercise with audience participation, global speakers, engaging topics. Experience cyber different at www.cyberhubsummit.com.